My family asked me to confess to a felony to save my golden child brother, so I did the opposite Reddit stories. They expected me to sacrifice my future like I always had. Instead, I told the truth, and everything they built on lies collapsed at once. Hi, I'm Rowan, 29, and 3 months ago my family tried to ruin my entire life because I refused to be their designated scapegoat. Spoiler, it backfired so hard the fallout is still smoldering. Before everything went nuclear, my life was painfully normal. I worked as an auto electrician at a mid-sized repair shop, lived alone in a small but clean apartment, paid my bills on time, and minded my own business. I wasn't rich, but I was stable, and in my family, stability was basically a crime. See, I'm the oldest of 3. My sister, Ivy, 26, works as a wedding photographer and somehow believes that makes her a micro-celebrity. My brother Colt, 24, is a walking cautionary tale, impulsive, entitled, allergic to accountability. If the universe was giving out consequences, he was always at the back of the line holding a "not me" sign. My parents worshipped him like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs. If Steve Jobs had dropped out of community college twice and crashed 2 cars that weren't his. The dynamic was simple. If Ivy messed up, it was, "She's under so much pressure." If Colt messed up, it was, "Boys make mistakes." If I messed up? Armageddon. If they needed something? It was always me. If someone had to take the blame? Me again. If something went missing? Clearly me. So when Colt's newest mess exploded, I should have predicted I was about to get drafted into yet another cover-up. I just didn't realize how spectacularly unhinged it would become. It started on a Sunday morning. I was under a car in the shop, changing out a corroded starter harness, when my phone buzzed 13 times in a row. I thought someone had died. Close, but not in the way I expected. The texts were from my mom, urgent in that uniquely parental way where they say nothing useful while insisting it's an emergency. "Call me now. Your brother needs help. Please answer. This is serious." Then one from Dad. "Come to the house. Now." No details. No explanation. Just the kind of command tone they only used when they'd already decided something was my fault. Against my better judgment, I clocked out early and went over. When I walked in, the whole family was already gathered in the living room like they were staging an intervention, but for me, which was inconvenient since I hadn't done anything. Dad paced. Mom cried. Ivy looked annoyed that I existed. And Colt? He sat hunched on the couch, elbows on knees, face ghost white, avoiding my eyes completely. The moment I stepped inside, Dad pointed at me like I was a defendant walking into court. "Rowan," he said, "we need to talk about the drugs." I blinked. "Whose drugs?" Silence. Mom sniffled. Dad exhaled like this was physically painful for him. Then Ivy, in that nasal voice she saves specifically for sounding morally superior, said, "Colt says they're yours?" I laughed. Not a normal laugh. A what the hell dimension did I wake up and laugh? Colt still wouldn't look at me, which told me everything I needed to know. "Okay," I said, wiping my face. "What exactly did he say is mine?" Dad straightened, crossing his arms like he was the CEO of Moron Incorporated. "Your brother was pulled over last night," he said. "The officers found substances in his car." "Substances," I repeated. "As in drugs?" Mom gasped like I'd said a slur. "Don't say that word," she whispered. "It makes it sound criminal." "It is criminal," I said. Dad slammed his fist on the side table. "Watch your tone." I turned to Colt. "You want to tell me what you told them?" Colt finally lifted his head. He had that pathetic watery-eyed look he always whipped out when he wanted to dodge consequences. It wasn't mine," he said. "The cops wouldn't believe me." I panicked. "And blamed me," I said. "Classic." He winced. "You're the only one I know who you know." "No," I snapped. "I don't. Please enlighten me on what I supposedly know." He floundered. You work at a shop. People there smoke all the time. I figured maybe. Oh my God, Ivy said dramatically. Stop yelling. This negativity is killing my aura. I stared at her. You're about 30 seconds from having no aura left at all, Ivy. She huffed and sank deeper into her chair. Dad stepped between us like he'd been waiting for his big heroic moment. Rowan, he said, your brother is facing charges. Real charges. His future is at stake. Ah, I said. There it is. What? He asked. The part where you tell me his life matters more than mine. Mom wrung her hands. Sweetheart, we're just trying to protect him. He has so much to lose. And I don't? I asked. You're stable, she said. You'll be fine. That hit me harder than it should have. Stable. The family pack meal. Translation: you can tank a felony and still survive. Meanwhile, Colt, who had never worked a full week in his life, apparently needed protection from reality. Dad took a deep breath. Then said the words that flipped a switch inside me. Rowan, you need to take responsibility. For what? For the drugs, he said. Tell the police they're yours. My jaw dropped. Colt looked relieved, like this was an expected solution. Ivy nodded as if this were perfectly reasonable. Mom actually brightened. It's just a possession charge, she said. You won't go to jail. It'll barely affect you. But Colt, he can't risk his future. Ivy finished for her. You don't have a career to ruin. That was when I knew I was done with these people. But they weren't done with me. I didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Not because I was shocked, though I was, but because I needed my brain to catch up to the sheer stupidity of what they were asking. Finally I said, let me get this straight. You want me to call the police, confess to drug possession, get a criminal record, and tank my entire livelihood, so he doesn't get in trouble? Dad nodded like I just solved a math problem. Exactly. You understand. I was being sarcastic. I said. He waved that off. Rowan, you're almost 30. You're not in school. You're not climbing some corporate ladder. You have a job that will take you back regardless. Your brother doesn't have those safety nets. Safety nets? I repeated. He doesn't even have a work ethic. Mom flinched. Don't be cruel. 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 Right. Because I was the villain here. Colt finally spoke again, barely above a mumble. I'm sorry, man. I panicked. If this sticks, I'm done. My record will be ruined. My career. What career? I snapped. You've had 4 jobs in 2 years. He looked wounded. I didn't care. Dad stepped in again, palms raised like he was negotiating a hostage situation. Rowan, nobody's asking you to go to jail. Just take the hit. Say the drugs belong to you. It'll be a misdemeanor at most. A slap on the wrist. Mom nodded eagerly. And once everything settles, we'll help you get back on your feet. We promise. Ah, yes, the famous parental promise. As reliable as a wet paper umbrella. I sat down slowly, elbows on my knees, hands clasped. Let me ask one question, I said. Just one. They all leaned forward. If Colt hadn't blamed me, what would you have done? Dead silence. Finally, Ivy said the quiet part out loud. We'd still be trying to fix it, but it wouldn't destroy the family the way it would if everyone knew he had the drugs. There it was. My value boiled down to this. I was disposable. Colt was not. I leaned back in my chair. Okay, I said. If I take the blame, what exactly happens next? They all perked up, hopeful, relieved, stupid. Dad exhaled. We schedule a meeting with the officer handling the case. You tell them the drugs are yours. Colt is cleared. The charges get shifted. And you'll help me with the fallout? I asked. Mom nodded vigorously. Of course. I looked around the room. At my father, A man who only praised me when it benefited him. At my mother, who would set herself on fire to keep Colt warm. At Ivy, who treated me like an inconvenience at best. At Colt, whose life had been one long series of other people saving him. And I smiled. A slow, calm, unsettling smile. Okay, I said softly. I'll handle it. Mom burst into tears of relief. Dad clapped me on the shoulder. I knew you'd do the right thing. Ivy rolled her eyes like my cooperation was overdue. Colt actually whispered, "Thanks, man." Seriously. But what none of them realized, what they couldn't even imagine, was that handle it didn't mean what they thought it did. Because I wasn't planning to save Colt. I was planning to end this family dynamic permanently. They thought they'd won. Mom was already making tea like this was some heartwarming family moment. Dad started outlining his plan, which was just 3 steps of nonsense. Rowan confesses. Colt walks free. Everything goes back to normal. Spoiler, nothing was going back to normal. I sat there, nodding in the right places, pretending to be the dutiful son, the problem solver, the eldest child who always handles things. Inside, I was building a blueprint. A clean one. Precise. Untraceable. Bulletproof. Because if they were willing to sacrifice me to protect Colt, then they deserved to watch their favorite son's entire house of cards collapse in slow, spectacular fashion. And the thing is, Colt had left a trail of dumb behind him for years. Nobody had ever bothered to look because my parents were always covering for him. But I started looking. While Mom rambled about how this will bring us closer as a family, I opened my phone under the table and pulled up old texts, old photos, old voicemails, old payment notifications, old Venmo descriptions that were one step above writing, drugs LOL. Colt wasn't careful. He never needed to be. And what I found wasn't just incriminating, it was a career-ending anthology of self-inflicted stupidity. But that wasn't the revenge. That was just the foundation. The revenge required something cleaner. So after family time, I left and went straight to work, not my job, but the thing I excel at. Rebuilding broken systems. Or, if necessary, taking them apart. First step, the police. I called the officer whose card my parents had given me. "Hi," I said, calm and polite. "This is Rowan Lane. I'm calling about my brother's case. I have information." There was a pause. "Yes, Mr. Lane. What can you tell me?" "I need to make a statement. In person." "He told me to come by the next afternoon." "Perfect. Next step, documentation." I spent the evening gathering every scrap of evidence of Colt's drug use, Colt's dealing, Colt's sourcing, Colt's Venmo history, Colt's texts bragging about side income, Colt's friends asking for more from your guy, photos of bags in his room from back when we lived together, voicemails from people asking if he was still selling, and the crown jewel, a screenshot from 2 nights ago, him texting a friend. "Had to stash the stuff in my bro's ride. Cops won't look there. Dude's a Boy Scout LOL. Idiot. Absolute idiot." Next step, insurance. I wasn't just protecting myself. I was building a fortress. I uploaded everything to a locked drive, a backup drive, a second backup, a scheduled email to myself, a scheduled email to a law firm just in case. Then I wrote a clean, concise statement summarizing everything. No embellishment. No emotion. Just facts. Finally, I crashed at my apartment, slept 6 hours, and woke up with something I hadn't felt in years. Not fear. Not anger. Control. The next afternoon, I walked into the precinct with a binder. The officer greeted me. "Are you here to confess?" he asked. I smiled. "No," I said. "I'm here to tell the truth. Everything." He raised an eyebrow. "Go on." So I did. I laid out 10 years of Colt's drug habits. His sourcing. His dealing. His attempt to plant evidence on me. His confession to me at the house. The family meeting. The pressure to take the fall. The coercion. The threats. The manipulation. Then I handed over the binder. The officer read the first page. His eyebrows shot up. By page 3, his jaw tightened. By the end, he said only one thing. "Mr. Lane, we'll be reopening the case." I nodded. Good. But that wasn't the end. Because destroying Colt's legal defense was only phase 1. Phase 2? That was for my parents. And theirs was going to hurt much, much worse. The police handled Colt. Phase 2 was about handling my parents. Because here's the truth. Colt didn't become an entitled, manipulative disaster on his own. He had an entire support team, Mom and Dad, the coaching staff of Delusional United, encouraging every bad decision he ever made. So, I went for the foundation this time. Their reputation, their finances, their future comfort. Not out of spite, okay, partly out of spite, but mostly because they needed to learn that choosing a golden child comes with a price. And I wasn't paying it anymore. First, I called my landlord. Remember how my parents co-signed my first lease years ago before I refinanced it myself? Yeah? I'd like that documentation updated. Remove them entirely. Done. Check. Next, I logged into my bank accounts, the ones my parents had been helping manage when I was younger, and removed their access. Then I checked my phone plan. Family plan. Guess whose numbers were still on it? Removed. Within seconds. Then came the satisfying part. The emergency contacts. Doctor's office. Employer. Insurance. Financial accounts. Every place where Mom and Dad still lingered on my file got updated to. Primary contact, Rowan Lane. Secondary contact, none. The psychological equivalent of unfriending someone from your life records. Now for the big move. My parents survived on 2 things. Their reputation in their picture-perfect suburban social circle. Their belief that all their children would eventually take care of them. Well, time to adjust expectations. I wrote an email. Short. Cold. Crystal clear. Subject: regarding future family obligations. Body: I will not be participating in financial assistance, housing support, or caretaking for either of you now or in the future. Your actions during Colt's criminal case severed that expectation permanently. Do not contact me again regarding help. This decision is final. Sent. Delivered. Read. Instant chaos. Dad texted within 3 minutes. Think about what you're doing. Mom followed with, we were scared, we made mistakes, don't do this to us. Then Ivy. You're being dramatic. Then Dad again. You'll regret this. Then Colt. Bro, we can fix this, please just talk to me. I didn't reply. Not to any of them. And then phase 3 hit like a car crash. I got a voicemail from the detective. Mr. Lane, just keeping you informed, your brother was taken into custody again. With the additional evidence you provided, the DA is pursuing full charges. Your parents were present during the arrest and attempted to interfere. They may be facing their own obstruction citations. Just a heads up. I replayed that voicemail twice. Not out of pleasure, but out of closure. This wasn't karma. This was cause and effect. They built this. Not me. But here's the thing. The universe wasn't done with them yet. Because phase 4? That one wasn't planned. That one just happened. And it changed everything. Phase 4 hit me on a random Thursday evening. I had just finished a long shift at the shop and ordered takeout. I was in pajama pants, halfway through a burrito the size of a small infant, when someone buzzed my apartment gate. I ignored it. 30 seconds later, someone buzzed again. Then again. Then again. Then my phone rang, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Fine, I answered. Rowan speaking. A shaky voice. Please don't hang up. Mom. I didn't speak. She took that as permission to keep going. We need to talk. Please. We're downstairs. That snapped my attention. Downstairs? At my building? I walked to the balcony and looked over the railing. There they were. Mom. Dad. No Colt, presumably still in a police station, jail, or lawyer's office. Mom looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Dad looked like someone had drained the arrogance right out of him and replaced it with desperation. I considered ignoring them. But then I thought, no. This ends on my terms. I buzzed them in. They came up slow, as if the hallway itself might judge them. I opened my door and stepped back, not inviting them in, just allowing them to enter if they dared. They did. Mom started crying instantly. Dad tried to speak first. Rowan, No, I said. Calm. Cold. You don't start. He shut up. Good. I leaned against the counter with my arms folded. Why are you here? Mom spoke through tears. Your brother, they're saying he might go to prison. Real prison. Years. Yeah, I said. That's how felonies work. She flinched. Dad stepped in. They're using your evidence. The screenshots. The messages. The financial records. Without it, the case would be weaker. You're welcome, I said. Mom shook her head fiercely. No! This isn't something to be proud of. This is tearing our family apart. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Actually laughed. Our family? I said. You mean the people who asked me to confess to a felony to protect the golden child? That family? That's what's tearing apart. Dad exhaled sharply. Rowan, we made a mistake. You made dozens of mistakes, I said. For 20 years. You prioritized one child and treated the others like accessories. You don't understand, he snapped. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said. You're not here to apologize. You're here because you want something from me. Silence. Then Mom. We want you to retract your statement. I blinked. No. Dad stepped forward, palms out. If you tell the DA you overreacted. I didn't. That you misinterpreted things. I didn't. That you were emotional. I wasn't. That you regret providing evidence. I don't. Mom choked out. Please. Please. He's our son. So am I said. But that never mattered to you. Dad clenched his jaw. If Colt goes to prison, he said quietly, we'll never recover. I shrugged. That's between you and the consequences you raised. Then Mom said the one sentence that ended any microscopic hint of sympathy I still had. If you don't fix this, we'll lose everything, Rowan. Everything. Our house, our savings, our retirement. We'll have nothing. I stared at her. Slowly. Deliberately. Then said, that sounds like a you problem. Mom started sobbing so hard she had to sit down. Dad looked at me like he didn't recognize me. You would let your parents suffer? You told me, I said, the night you asked me to confess, that if I walked out that door, I was on my own. Yes, but I took you at your word. Silence thickened the room. Finally, Dad said, defeated, you're really not going to help us. No, I said. I'm not. Mom whispered, we're losing our home. I nodded. Actions have consequences. You taught me that. Or tried to. They looked broken. Small. Human. Then Dad made one last attempt. If you ever decide to forgive us. I won't, I said. Please stop pretending this is reparable. Mom wiped her eyes. Then I guess this is goodbye. It was goodbye months ago, I said gently. They stood. Walked to the door. Opened it. Paused. Dad looked back once, pride gone, certainty gone, everything gone. Take care of yourself, he said quietly. I've been doing that my whole life, I replied. And they left. No shouting. No slamming. No theatrics. Just a quiet, defeated exit. I closed the door. Locked it. Deadbolt. Chain. Latch. Then I sat on the couch. Exhaled. And felt, for the first time in years, a clean, deep, peaceful silence. In the days after my parents' visit, everything around me felt quiet. Not peaceful, exactly. More like the air after a storm, broken branches everywhere, but the sky finally clear. I went to work. I slept well. I ate actual meals instead of stress snacks. My phone didn't buzz nonstop anymore. It didn't buzz at all. Ivy unfollowed me on everything, a gift. Dad deleted his Facebook, coward. Mom created a new number I immediately blocked. Colt, interestingly, didn't reach out. Maybe because he wasn't allowed a phone. Or maybe because he finally realized I wasn't his safety net. I was the scissors. But here's the thing about removing toxic people. Once you clear the noise, you finally hear the truth inside your own head. And my truth was simple. I didn't want revenge anymore. I'd already taken it, and won. Now I wanted closure. So I drove to the one place I had avoided since the whole mess began. My parents' house. Not to talk. Not to patch things up. Just to see it. To confirm, physically, that I didn't live there anymore. Not emotionally, not psychologically, not an obligation. The neighborhood looked exactly the same. Perfect lawns. Perfect hedges. Perfect houses. Perfect lies. Their mailbox was stuffed, never a good sign. The grass hadn't been cut in a while. The curtains were closed at noon, also never a good sign. I reached the porch. There was a notice taped to the door. Red. Bold. Legal. Foreclosure proceeding initiated. Final notice before action. I stood there long enough to feel nothing. Not satisfaction. Not joy. Not pity. Nothing. Just confirmation. This was the house where they told me Colt mattered more. Where they told me to confess to a crime. Where they weaponized guilt like a hobby. And now it was hollow. A monument to their choices. I turned to leave when a voice called out. Rowan? I turned. It was Mrs. Hargrove, the neighbor who always pretended her labradoodle was a trained emotional support animal. She walked over quickly. I heard about your brother, she said. Terrible thing. And your parents, well. She lowered her voice. They've been telling people you abandoned them in their hour of need. There it was. The predictable smear campaign. I almost laughed. Did they also tell you, I asked, that they asked me to confess to a felony to save Colt? Her face froze. Oh. Yeah, I said. Oh. I stepped closer. You want the truth? They didn't need me. They needed a scapegoat. And I finally said no. She nodded awkwardly. Well, that explains a lot. I started to walk back to my car. But she called out again. Rowan? I paused. You're not the villain here, she said gently. Some people just can't handle the consequences they created. I nodded once. Then got in my car and drove away. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel tethered to a house that had never really been a home. I felt free. Untethered. Unowned. I drove until the houses shrank behind me and the sun dipped low. That's when my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Voicemail transcribed automatically. Rowan, it's Colt. I know you probably won't talk to me, but I need to tell you something. Before I go in. It's about what really happened. Call me if you want to know. I stared at the screen. What really happened? What was left to confess? What could possibly be worse? I didn't call him back. Not because I wasn't curious, I was, but because Colt only ever reached out when he needed something. Information. Money. Favors. Cover. Never accountability. Never honesty. So I let the voicemail sit. But it kept sitting there in my notifications, like an itch I couldn't scratch. Eventually, curiosity won. I didn't call him. I wrote a text. Rowan. Say what you need to say. I'm not calling. He replied within a minute, which told me two things. He'd been waiting. He was desperate. Colt. I didn't tell you everything. About the drugs. About why I panicked. I wasn't just holding them. I owed someone. Someone dangerous. I sat back. Of course he did. Because Colt never did anything small, even his stupidity scaled. Rowan. Not my problem. You made your choices. A pause. Then. Colt. You're right. But you should know something. Dad knew. I froze. What? Rowan. Knew what? His answer came in a burst of rapid-fire messages, like he needed to get the words out before he lost his nerve. Colt. Dad knew about the drugs. Knew I'd been selling. Knew I was in trouble. He didn't want to admit it because of how it would look. He told me to hide it until after the wedding. He told me to figure it out. He said you'd help if it got messy. That you always did. He said you owed the family. I read that twice. 3 times. 4. I didn't realize I was gripping my phone until my knuckles cracked. My father didn't just believe Colt over me. He planned for me to take the fall if things went sideways. He built the entire situation assuming, if something goes wrong, Rowan will handle it. Colt's next message hit even harder. Colt. I didn't want to use your truck. Dad suggested it. Said no one would question you. Said you'd survive it. Said I wouldn't. I felt something cold settle in my chest, not anger, not shock. Recognition. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't favoritism. This was strategy. My father had spent years conditioning me into a role. The expendable son. And I had walked into it again and again, thinking I was being responsible, helpful, strong. Colt sent one final message. Colt. I know you won't forgive me. But I needed you to know. It wasn't just me. I'm sorry. For everything. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I deleted the entire thread. Not out of rage. But because I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need proof. I didn't need answers. I didn't need closure from the people who broke me. I already had closure, the moment I walked away. The moment I built a life that had nothing to do with them. The moment I stopped trying to earn love from people who only valued me for my usefulness. I set my phone down, exhaled, and felt something strange. Relief. Deep, uncluttered relief. For the first time in my life, the story wasn't about fixing them. It was about choosing me. And I wasn't done choosing me yet. Colt's confession changed the shape of the story, but not the ending. I didn't suddenly feel sympathy. I didn't feel bonded to him by shared trauma. I didn't feel compelled to swoop in and rescue anyone. What I felt was confirmation, a final stamp on a truth I had been circling for years. My family never saw me as a son. They saw me as infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't get thanked. It gets used. But even after deleting the texts, one question kept nagging me. If Dad knew. If he orchestrated this. If he chose Colt over me intentionally. Why show up at my apartment? Why beg? Why act surprised? I didn't have the answer, and as much as I hated it, my brain wanted one. Not closure, comprehension. So I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove by their new apartment. Not to talk. Not to reconnect. Just to observe. It was a rundown building near the industrial side of town. Peeling siding, rusted balconies, old units crammed together like regret in architectural form. I parked across the street, window cracked, engine off. I wasn't there long before I saw movement. Dad stepped outside. Not the version of him I was used to, the clean-shaven, golf shirt, a Choi-compliant suburban patriarch. This version looked smaller, thinner, older. Like someone had siphoned the arrogance straight out of him and replaced it with exhaustion. He dumped a kitchen trash bag into the dumpster, missed, picked it up, tried again. Then he leaned on the edge of the bin, hands trembling. And for the first time in my life, I saw my father as something other than a force. I saw him as a man. A deeply, catastrophically flawed man. A man whose entire identity was tied to controlling outcomes. A man who couldn't strategize his way out of the consequences he'd engineered. A man who finally had to live in the outcome he tried to shove onto me. And suddenly the answer became obvious. He hadn't come to my apartment because he wanted forgiveness. He had come because he never learned to function without me. He had always assumed I'd carry him, and the second I stopped, his whole world collapsed. He didn't know how to live without a scapegoat. Without a shield. Without me. I watched him stand there alone, staring into a dumpster like it held the answers to his problems. He looked defeated. But I didn't feel triumphant. Not vindicated. Not satisfied. What I felt was freedom. For the first time in my life, I felt completely free of him. I didn't owe him anything. Not conversation. Not comfort. Not forgiveness. Not even hatred. He had finally become what he always told me I'd be if I didn't do the right thing. On his own. I stayed one more minute. Then I turned the key, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. He never saw me. That was intentional. Some people don't deserve front row seats to the person you become after they tried to break you. 2 days after I watched Dad by the dumpster, something happened that I absolutely did not expect. I got a letter. Not a text. Not a voicemail. Not a surprise visit. A letter. In an envelope. Stamped. Handwritten. Like someone trying to communicate from 1987. It was slid under my door sometime while I was at work. The handwriting on the front wasn't Mom's. Wasn't Dad's. It was Colt's. For a moment, I considered throwing it straight into the trash. No hesitation. No curiosity. But something stopped me. Maybe because people don't use pen and paper unless the weight of what they're saying feels too heavy to deliver any other way. So, I opened it. The handwriting inside was shaky, uneven. Not dramatic, more like someone who hadn't held a pen in a long time. The letter wasn't long. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't manipulative. It was honest. At least, honest in the only way Colt was capable of being. Here's the part that mattered. I spent years thinking you were the reason everything went wrong for me. But the truth is, things went wrong because I expected you to carry the consequences of my choices. I don't want that anymore. I'm trying to get clean, but I don't know who I am without being the one Mom and Dad protect. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed you to know I'm trying. For once. Then at the bottom, scribbled quickly like he almost didn't want to write it. You didn't ruin my life. I did. And I'm done pretending otherwise. I stared at that for a long time. Not because I felt emotional. Not because it healed anything. But because it was the first time in 31 years anyone in my family had taken responsibility for something without expecting me to carry part of it. I didn't write back. But I didn't throw the letter away either. I put it in a drawer. Not as a keepsake, as evidence that people can face their own truth, even if it takes consequences hitting them like a freight train. That night, I sat on my balcony with a beer, watching the city lights blink as planes came in low over the horizon. I thought about the test. The false report. The cops at my door. The begging. The threats. The $1 check. The collapse of everything they'd built on lies and favoritism. And finally, the letter. Then it hit me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not numb. Not over it. Not healed. Just not angry. Anger is a tether. It keeps you tied to the ruined version of someone. It forces you to look backward. But I had let go of that without realizing it. Not because they deserved peace. Because I did. I didn't forgive them. I didn't want reconciliation. I didn't want to rebuild anything. But I wasn't dragging the weight anymore. I was just living my life. And theirs? The consequences they ran from for decades? Those were finally catching up, and not because of anything I did. Just because that's how reality eventually works. Right as I was about to go inside, my phone buzzed. A text from Mario. Just heard from someone, your bro got a job at a warehouse. Not great pay, but he's showing up every day. Thought you'd want to know. I typed back. Good for him. And I meant it. Because him getting his life together didn't cost me anything. And his failure never would have saved me. I closed the door behind me, turned off the lights, and went to bed. For the first time in years, I slept easy. 2 weeks later, I got a call I didn't expect, not from my parents, not from Colt, not from anyone tied to that disaster. It was from Valdez, my supervisor. A man who communicates exclusively in grunts, profanity, and the occasional thumbs up when you've earned it. He never calls unless someone's fallen, quit, or died. So when I saw his name pop up, my stomach did a little twist. I answered. Yeah? Long pause. Then his voice, low and flat. You good with heights? I blinked. Valdez, that's literally my job. Another pause. Then, the highest compliment this man has ever given another human. Good. Company wants to promote you. I sat up straighter. What? Field safety manager. He continued. You'd oversee 3 states. Pay bump. Real schedule. No more motel living unless you want it. I nearly dropped my phone. This job, this exact role, was the kind of thing people spent 10 years chasing. And here he was offering it like he was asking if I wanted fries with that. Why me? I finally asked. Valdez grunted. Corporate said you handled that false report better than anyone they've ever seen. Followed protocol to the letter. Documented everything. Made the lawyers' lives easy. Showed discipline. And I told them you don't panic under pressure. I let those words settle. I'd spent months feeling like I was stuck in a tug-of-war with my past, like my family's damage still had hooks in me. But here was the future calling. Literally. When do I start? I said. Monday. Pack your stuff. And get real boots. You can't be walking around like some rookie in those discount things you wear. He hung up before I could tell him they were expensive boots. That whole afternoon felt unreal. I wasn't sleeping in my truck anymore. I wasn't hiding from cops. I wasn't being scapegoated to protect someone else's future. I was building something. And it was mine. Later that night I told Mario. He screamed into the phone like I'd announced I won the lottery. Which, honestly? This felt better. A promotion earned by surviving hell and coming out sharper. At around midnight, I stepped out onto my balcony again. The city was quiet. A train horn blew somewhere in the distance. The air was cool enough to raise goosebumps. And suddenly, unprompted, a thought hit me. My family had spent their whole lives trying to protect the wrong son. And without their protection, I'd built a future stronger than any of them could imagine. Not out of spite. Not out of revenge. Just out of the simple truth. Some of us grow when no one is holding us up. And some collapse the second no one is holding them up. I finished my drink, breathed in the cold night air, and smiled, not at the past, but at everything ahead of me. A new job. A new city. A life built without excuses, without manipulation, without being anyone's backup plan. For the first time in years, the next chapter felt wide open. I started my new position the following Monday. Fresh boots. Fresh uniform. Fresh life. The handheld radio clipped to my vest crackled nonstop, and suddenly I wasn't the guy who climbs. I was the guy people called when anything went wrong. 3 states worth of crews. Hundreds of towers. My decisions carried weight now. And it felt good, Not the adrenaline rush of climbing steel at 300 feet, but something steadier. Something solid. Stability, not survival. The company flew me out to Colorado for leadership training. A real hotel this time, not a motel with flickering lights and cigarette burns in the carpet. A king-size bed, blackout curtains, and water pressure that could blast barnacles off a ship. During the orientation dinner, one of the execs said, "We're impressed by how you handled adversity. Most people fall apart. You didn't." I smiled politely, but inside? I laughed. Because the kind of adversity they meant, a false report, a suspension, a corporate investigation, was nothing compared to 31 years of being told I was second place to someone who couldn't tie his own shoes without applause. I was built for pressure. My past had forged me for it. When the week ended, I flew back and stepped into my apartment, my clean, quiet, paid-off space, and for the first time in months, I didn't think about my family. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. Not with anything. They weren't a weight anymore. Not a threat. Not a shadow. Just people who made their choices. And I made mine. A week later, I got a final text from an unknown number. Short. Simple. "I'm proud of you, Dad." I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because I didn't need anything from him anymore. I set my phone down, grabbed my gear, and headed out. The sun was setting behind the towers, painting long shadows across the dirt road. My radio buzzed with another call, another problem only I could fix. A real future, built by my own hands, waited for me. Not defined by what they did to me, but by what I survived, and who I became anyway. I climbed into my truck, started the engine, and drove forward. No looking back.